Hi, let's think about the rhetorical situation for your evaluation essay and how description might be used to emphasize those aspects. You'll notice that a lot of the chapters in the textbook, as well as the learning activities, end with discussion of rhetorical situation, and that's because these factors are important in nearly every aspect of writing. And they're going to be the things that you use to cater your writing to your specific conditions that you're writing in. So it's things like purpose, audience, genre, stance, and media and design. So let's think about how each of those things come into play in this essay that you're working on right now. So the purpose for this essay, as you know, is to make a judgment about something that you've reviewed. And really you have a couple of purposes here: to inform the audience about the subject and to persuade the audience of your judgment, offering some sort of recommendation. This thing is something you should check out, or this is something that you should avoid. So description can be used for both of those purposes. You probably want to include some description of just what this subject is all about, right? Especially for people who may not be familiar with it. But maybe even more importantly is to use description to persuade. Remember what makes things persuasive or convincing. It's a couple of different things. One is giving reasons for the points that you're trying to make, right? Use description to help make that clear to the audience. But also it's including evidence or support to help emphasize a point, right? So, if you're talking about a movie, maybe at some point you'll describe a specific scene that explains why you think something is a strength or why it's a weakness, right? So in a lot of ways, description will help you achieve your purpose. Going along with that, and all of these considerations go together, is going to be audience. A lot of times students act as though they're writing to me as their audience. And while realistically I am part of that audience, as are some of your classmates who are going to be reading your rough draft, really I would think about your audience as like an imaginary general audience. A bunch of people who are all different backgrounds, different beliefs, and people with different levels of familiarity with the subject. Some who may have experienced it and some who may have not experienced it, right? So what that means is you need to write in such a way that anybody reading your essay will have a good enough understanding of the subject that they can decide whether they're convinced by your judgment or not, right? You don't want to assume that your audience knows who you're talking about or knows what you're talking about. So that description is going to help you ensure that everybody has an adequate amount of knowledge about it. The genre, as you guys know, is an evaluation. And if you remember back to a couple of weeks ago when we talked about key features, the very first key feature of an evaluation is that it should contain a concise description of the subject. So, yes, I think that there needs to be a little bit of summary of the subject that you're reviewing, but that shouldn't dominate the whole essay, right? I would keep any summary description to probably like a paragraph or so. However, as you're evaluating, and most of your paragraphs of the essay should be evaluating some aspect of the subject, I think when you're evaluating, that's where you can use some description as well. So again, if you're talking about a strength or a weakness of some aspect, maybe give a specific example of that. If you're doing a movie, maybe there's a particular scene that helps exemplify what you're talking about, right? So again, keep the summary stuff to a minimum, but description can be useful in the evaluation stuff as well. When it comes to stance, that is really the attitude that you have toward your subject as a writer. and how you want to be viewed by your audience. For this essay, I think your stance is as someone who's knowledgeable about the subject and whose opinion about it can be trusted. Trust has a lot to do with the persuasiveness of an essay, I think, because if we as an audience don't trust that you know what you're talking about, or that you have thoroughly thought through something, or that you've clearly explained your reasoning, if we have any doubts about that, then we're less likely to be convinced by what you have to say, right? So again, description can be used to help you maintain this stance, right? Especially when you're talking about your criteria. Show that you've thought through these different aspects. Show that you know about the genre that this specific thing you're reviewing fits into, right? Again, it's very appropriate for you to use opinion in this particular essay, right? You're talking about what you liked and what you didn't like when it comes to a certain subject. So again, this shouldn't just be some objective summary explaining information about the subject. It has to contain that judgment or evaluation aspect. And then finally, always a consideration, and realistically, probably for a lot of your classes, this aspect is already set for you, is going to be the media and the design of the document that you create, right? So, in this case, and this is always going to be true for this class, you're always typing a document that you're going to upload to Blackboard, and it's going to be viewed electronically. And, that is a little bit different than typing something up and then printing it out, knowing somebody that will be looking at it in that way, right? What that means is that to get a point across and to explain things, the primary and really only way you're able to do that is through your words. If somebody doesn't understand what you wrote, that's because somewhere along the line you dropped the ball and either didn't include enough description or your wording was awkward. But we're only going to get the impression that you're trying to give us through your writing. So, what that means is that, when you're giving a speech or, you're typing a blog or something like that, you have the benefit of including charts or videos or links, other stuff that will help you to illustrate your point. Your words are the only thing that are going to do that in this essay. And that's why you need to be careful and descriptive with how you word things. In terms of the design, that's really how things are arranged in your document and what information is included. For English, we use what's called MLA style, and that stands for Modern Language Association. Other classes may use other styles, like another common one is APA, which stands for American Psychological Association. All that means is in these different styles, there are certain expectations for how documents should look in terms of like how you cite things or where things should be located on the page. In MLA style, that means things like in the upper right-hand corner of each page, you should include your last name and page number. In the upper left-hand corner of the first page, you should have your name, the professor's name, the course name, and the date. You should have a title for every essay that you do. Means using double spacing, using 12-point Times New Roman font, all that stuff. And again, as you go through college, you'll kind of learn what expectations there are for these different courses that you're going to be taking. So, again, description is going to be impacted by all of these aspects that we talked about. So what I have below here is kind of a continuation of what I was talking about in the previous video, using the example of Back to the Future. So I have a little paragraph, if we could call it that, and then a longer paragraph underneath. So let's look at the little paragraph first. While on the surface it might be labeled as sci-fi due to its time travel theme, Back to the Future is a good example of a teen comedy movie. The film is just as much about Marty's mishaps trying to be a responsible adult as it is about flying DeLoreans and parallel universes. So if I were writing this in a paper, I probably could not get away with just including these couple of sentences here, right? And mostly because it's not really addressing these considerations that I have up here, right? It's not giving me very much information. Like if I had never seen Back to the Future, would I know who Marty is? Would I know what DeLorean is being referred to, right? But it's also not very persuasive. It's not explaining why I think it's a good teen comedy. So again, it just needs to be fleshed out, and description is the way to do that. So I wrote a longer paragraph underneath where I tried to use lots of descriptive moments to address some of these rhetorical considerations. What I would say is that, if I were really writing this for a paper, I would make sure that this is double spaced. I single spaced it just so I could keep it on one page here. It's kind of a long paragraph, so if I revised it, maybe I could break it up into a couple paragraphs. But as it is, I just want to illustrate, using description, how you can get your point across. So I kept the same topic sentence here. While on the surface it might be labeled as sci-fi due to its time travel theme, Back to the Future is a good example of a teen comedy movie. So probably the topic sentence of each of your paragraphs should be making some sort of claim and emphasizing either a strength or a weakness. Here I'm talking about a strength, right? I think that Back to the Future is a good teen comedy movie. And this might be kind of a hot take, but I don't see it so much as sci-fi. So what you'll notice here is like the first few sentences, I'm just giving some summary description, right? And specifically for people who aren't familiar with this movie. Probably a lot of you have seen it, but if you haven't, hopefully this is enough information so anybody can know what I'm talking about here. The film centers on average teenage slacker Marty McFly, played by the youthful-looking Michael J. Fox. Marty's mentor/friend, mad scientist Doc Brown, played by the charmingly eccentric Christopher Lloyd, has realized his goal of inventing a time machine in the form of a decked-out DeLorean. When Brown gets shot for stealing the plutonium used to power the contraption, Marty must use it to escape from danger and go back to the past and warn Brown to prevent his death. So again, there's a lot more that happens in Back to the Future, but I want to give the audience just enough so they get the basic plot, like why Marty's in the past and, a couple of the important characters, right? So now, the rest of the paragraph, I'm going to try to prove this point that I'm making in the first sentence. Here's why I think it's a good example of a teen comedy movie. I'm going to try to show that I understand what's expected of a good teen comedy movie, right? So let's look at the rest of it. As dire as the situation may seem, Marty's journey back to 1955 is filled with all the awkward angst that makes teen movies comical. The film contains many of the same tropes that appear in most teen comedies. Significance placed on the big high school dance, experimenting with alcohol, sexual tension, cliques, etc. Back to the Future approaches these typical themes in a new way, however, in that Marty experiences these things through his parents' interactions with them, as they are teens like himself back in 1955. Interpersonal conflict with parents and authority figures is another common occurrence in teen comedies, but in Back to the Future, the humor often stems from the fact that Marty has to almost act as a parental figure to his own parents, building up his dad's confidence to stand up to the school bully, condemning his mom's drinking, smoking, and sexual advances, toward him no less, and carrying the responsibility of uniting his parents and saving the future. Some might call this film a teen comedy that happens to have a time machine in it, just as Twilight might be called a romance that happens to include vampires and werewolves. Yet the time travel serves as a vehicle, literally, that allows the uncomfortable situations between Marty and his parents to occur. Cleverly, Back to the Future does not try to be a sci-fi movie with amazing special effects or technical action sequences. Instead, the film plays to its strengths: Fox's relatability and comedic timing, skillfully written characters we can care about, and the creative reimagining of a familiar teen scenario that surprises us and makes us laugh for new reasons.